Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription.
For sake of our audience to have a better understanding, to compare your theoretical and conceptual explanation of the coaching to actual on-the-floor, realistic, tangible results, would you please give us some examples of results that you produce in the coaching with individuals and teams?
Yeah. So let me think of a good individual example. It would be someone who was taking on a new role. They were a woman following the footsteps of an older man. Very different styles. He was very, very extrovert. He was very dynamic. He was good with his external constituencies, not so good with the internal constituencies. Her gift in following in his footsteps and being his deputy for all these years was the internal, the organizational. So when she was looking at that chair, that leadership chair, she's like, Sandy, I don't see myself there. I don't look like him. I don't talk like him. And how do I lead that feels authentic? And so we worked together about creating a vision of herself as leader. And we used a vision of her up. She had to give a town hall right away. Strategy presentation, how are you going to take this organization forward and everything else? And she was pretty nervous about that. And she said, well, the way he would have done it was stand behind the podium, announce his broad strategy, and, everybody claps. And he was good at it. She said, I'm going to be on a stool. I have no podium. I'm going to draw from the crowd. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to get interactive. I'm going to bring some of my people up here to talk about the specifics of some of their aspects of the program.
Welcome to HR Talk, Unpacking Trends and Talent Innovations podcast series. I am Behnam Bakhshandeh, and I'm co-hosting this episode with my friend and colleague, Dr. Aileen Zaballero. Today's topic is role and place of coaching in human resources from two primary perspectives, current practice and future trends. We are lucky to have a knowledgeable and experienced executive coach and business consultant, Ms. Sandra Stewart. Sandy is the author of Building the Core Competencies of Change, a guide to coaching in organizations, a book about how to deploy coaching in organizations. Sandy established her company, SLS Coaching and Consulting, in 1999 to coach executives, teams, and groups. She is an ICF, International Coaching Federation, coaching program instructor. She also served on ICF, Independent Review Board, investigating worldwide ethics complaints for ICF. Sandy obtained her MBA from Columbia University and her bachelor's degree from Colleagues University. She has broad experience in strategy and marketing for Fortune 500 companies and as an independent organization management consultant for private and nonprofit organizations. You can find more information about Sandy at her website, sandrastewart.com. Please join me in welcoming Sandy to our podcast. Hi, Sandy. It's so good to have you. Thank you for giving us your valuable time and play with us in this HR podcast.
Oh, well, thank you. I love playing in the coaching sandbox, so I look forward to it.
So, Sandy, give us a brief introduction. I know we talked about you in the opening, but give us a 30, 40 seconds introduction of who you are and especially what interests you to go after coaching as a career.
Yeah, good question. Well, so I have a business background, MBA, and then I worked for some corporations in strategy and marketing. In 1999, one of a colleague of mine who was doing some consulting, organizational management consulting with, said, there's this thing called coaching, executive coaching. And it's brilliant because it was that nexus between an executive who needed a new strategy and their ability to actually execute on a strategy. And oh, we get to support people as coaches in that space. And so it was the early days of coaching. I became certified as a coach, have been coaching executives ever since. And then I've gotten involved also in the International Coaching Federation reviews ethical considerations and potential breaches. And I'm on that volunteer committee to do that. I teach coaching as well. And I've recently written a book on coaching in organizations.
Yeah, I got the copy. As soon as I saw you talking about it in LinkedIn, that was almost a year ago, like 9 months ago. I immediately got the copy because I was very impressed when we were writing the book about building a organizational coaching culture, and you were one of the contributors to that book in two different chapters. I was impressed with the leadership attitude you provided with
Oh,
one of our contributors who was writing about ethics of coaching and core standards of the coaching. You were just keep sending me information. Hey, use this if you want. Use this if you want. And I was so impressed with your generosity and willingness to participate beside your own accountabilities. So thank you for doing that.
yeah, you are welcome. Anything to advance coaching.
Excellent, excellent. So how do you define, Sandy, how do you define coaching in the context of today's dynamic
Oh,
workplace?
good. Yes. Well, first of all, what does coaching do? It's not mentoring, it's not therapy, it's not a lot of things. It's not consulting and advising as much as it is helping people learn. Meaning, we as coaches support people in what I call a generative learning cycle. Generative learning is where you take in new information, you experiment, and then you move into integrating what you've learned from that. So it requires reflection and integration. And then you keep going back into that cycle because it's a continuous learning loop. So that's what coaching does. And if we think about what do organizations need today, we're talking about an environment of constant change. And change is learning, right? Change is what we sometimes push against and don't want anything to do with.
Sometimes,
And coaches have this ability to help people in the learning that's required in change. And so, in terms of where business is today, it's really foundational. And your work, Behnam, in moving into the coaching culture space where whole organizations are adopting a coach-like approach, it's all about building that learning organization, all about how do we have an organization that's agile and fast and can support people in change. Yeah.
very good. For sake of our audience to have a better understanding, to compare your theoretical and conceptual explanation of the coaching to actual on the floor, realistic, tangible results. Would you please give us some examples of results that you produce in the coaching with individuals and teams?
Yeah. So let me think of a good individual example. Um, it would be someone who was taking on a new role. They were a woman following the footsteps of an older man. Very different styles. He was very, very extrovert. He was very dynamic. He was good with his external constituencies, not so good with the internal constituencies. Her gift in following in his footsteps and being his deputy for all these years was the internal, the organizational. So when she was looking at that chair, that leadership chair, she's like, Sandy, I don't see myself there. I don't look like him. I don't talk like him. And how do I lead that feels authentic? And so we worked together about creating a vision of herself as herself as leader. And we used a vision of her up. She had to give a town hall right away, strategy presentation, how are you going to take this organization forward and everything else. And she was pretty nervous about that. And she said, well, the way he would have done it was stand behind the podium, announce his broad strategy, and everybody claps. And he was good at it. She said, I'm going to be on a stool. I have no podium. I'm going to draw from the crowd. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to get interactive. I'm going to bring some of my people up here to talk about the specifics of some of their aspects of the program. And she said, I never would have kind of gotten there without this kind of stepping out of what my paradigm of leadership was into something that felt authentic and was me. See, so that's a very personal one-on-one conversation. And she went on to actually, that was a large portion of the organization. She went on to lead the organization. So I
Nice.
could say it was the coaching, but she was fabulous.
Isn't that funny when you remove the barriers that we put on ourselves?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell you, obviously you can hear my accent and broken English still after 30 years being in the United States. But that was the thing that stopped me to start the coaching. That's like, who wants to listen to my accent, right? And people was telling me, it's your message that matters. Your accent will disappear. So I can totally relate. There's a barrier we put in front of ourselves. Very nice. Sandy, what about teams or groups results?
Yeah, so I'll go to group coaching as distinct from team coaching first, and just say that one of the uses of coaching is integrating learning. If I'm learning a leadership training program, for example. And so I'm working with an organization where after each learning module, we then have individual coaching with the participants and a group coach, meaning people from all over the organization, they're not a team, they get together to process what they're learning about the concepts that were introduced. So they did a financial acumen training process where they were more deeply able to understand all the factors in, the CEO level financial kind of acumen. And they were like, this was great. It's really enhanced my understanding, but how do I use it? And so that's what we talked about, that integration and reflection part of the coaching, one-on-one. And then in the group, everybody came at it differently. So the group coaching, people were going, oh, you did that with your team then. So you took the financial acumen learning you had and you actually retaught it to your team on some level or looked at a business problem through that lens. And now we pulled a business problem actually that one of the group was having. And we said, if you look through it through the financial acumen lens of the key levers of a business, what do you see? How are you analyzing that? So we're still sort of training a little bit, but really it's a conversation and learning from each other. So that's group coaching.
And obviously you make some follow-up available to them, right?
Yeah. And so the one-on-one was a nice way then to make it very personal, whereas the group was, wow, we can learn from each other.
Yes.
And that had the other ancillary impact of decreasing silos within this organization, which was an overall objective, right? Because now they knew who each other was, they trusted each other.
Very nice. As you said, Sandy, you started your organization, your company, SLS Coaching and Consulting, 1999. So you are in the business a little bit more than 24 years.
Yeah.
Same as I started in 93. I'm an old man now. So how do you see, given you went through so many trends in last 2.5 decades, how do you see comparing the old approaches, old things, compared with the new trends that are coming out?
Yeah.
Left and right coming out. So how do you see some of the current trends in the coaching compared with the old ones?
Well, the first trend is adoption of coaching, right? So when I started out in 99, people would ask me which sport I coached if I said I was a coach. And going into an organization to sell in coaching, it would be selling coaching itself. Like, what is coaching? Why should I have it? And now most organizations have internal coaches, external coaches, team.
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of MYCPE to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
I would say their approach, there are some that are highly sophisticated and strategic in the way they use coaching. And I'd say that's the future. Then there are others who are still kind of back in the beginning where it was, I have an executive that could use a coach, right? It depends on the culture of the organization sometimes, their receptivity and their ability to be strategic in their use of coaching. And I kind of see this direction, and certainly the book that you've just edited, Behnam, on adopting a coaching culture as really the future. I think more and more organizations are seeing the need for the core competencies that coaching brings to an organization, to integrate them so that they have learners inside their organization. We talk about Peter Senge from the learning organization back in the 90s. And I thought, that was brilliant, but there was an element of like, so how do you operationalize a learning organization? And I think coaching is, priming the pump. It's teaching people how to learn themselves, their teams and their groups and so forth. And now your leadership is learning coaching skills. And now we're talking coaching culture. And now we have a learning organization because it's the coaching skills themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, which is bring to my follow-up question about this. How do you see these trends align with the evolving coaching culture, with a modern organization and new generation of employees coming in?
Oh, yeah.
The ages, I'm sure you dealt with them. This is something that I avoid like a plague, dealing with a bunch of 20 years olds. Because I see them as my children. My baby now is 33, right? My oldest is 43. And I see he's 20 years old, and I want to grab him and shake him. You don't know nothing. That doesn't work in coaching, right?
Apparently not. Yeah, it doesn't.
So how do you see these new trends
Yeah.
impacting the evolving culture of organizations?
Well, if you want good talent, good young 20-year-old talent, you have to make your organization attractive. And one of the ways in which organizations are making themselves attractive is by instituting coaching and coach-like behaviors, because it's about empowerment, attention to the professional development and well-being of people. So you teach your leaders those skills, great. But let me tell you a story about a software company in the UK. They wanted to solve a business dilemma that they had, which is they were hiring like crazy. They had a lot of young pups coming in, and they needed to catalyze their productivity because they wanted to be faster to market in the development of the software that they sold. So they thought, well, maybe we can bring in some coaches to integrate the learning, like we talked about before. Also, we struggle with the fact that they all want to do their one little thing. I'm really good at this. I'm 20. I know my stuff. And they wanted them to cross-fertilize their knowledge and work together and collaborate so that, no one resource was not usable in another capacity. So what did they do? They first they coached their executives in the organization, so the executives understood what coaching was. Then they deployed coaches. They trained coaches internally because they built the capacity in their HR department to both coach and to train coaching. They used external contractors as well. So they actually trained 200 internal coaches to their organization. So now they're starting to actually create people in the organization who not only coaching, but that's their kind of mindset, right? And then they integrated coaching skills training into their leadership training for their young pups. And what happened is, what's so cool is that they reduced silos. They got more open and growth mindsets in their young people around cross training. They, of course, got them up to speed faster by integrating the knowledge. But the thing they hadn't anticipated was they were named best place to work in the UK because of that culture. And now they were able to attract this young talent that they needed for the software production piece. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. And you know better than anybody else, it's not one size fit all.
That's it.
Sometimes you have to dance with what they throw at you. You have to dance with the different culture, even a different background, even geographical location cause more differences in how to get in to get people.
Can I ask you, you were talking about how you are coaching individuals, you were coaching teams and groups. How do you handle the individual who's skeptical of the coaching process? What is your strategy to get them on board when everyone else might be moving forward with the coaching ideas?
So when someone comes into coaching, even if their sponsor, their organization said, you need coaching, here's why, let's go do it. I ask that I have a chemistry meeting with them and say, yeah, this is what coaching is. It's also confidential. Here's what your sponsor, I think they should be aware what the sponsor wants from them in the coaching. That's not my job to tell them that, but however, we're confidential black box, and we're going to work on whatever it takes for you to not only do the kinds of things that your organization might be asking, but also to be energized and optimistic and happy about where you're sitting. So now they know I'm invested in them. There's still skepticism. And sometimes there's still that idea that it's punishment. And so I do work with the sponsor. The sponsor needs to market, so to speak, the coaching internally in a way that it's a gift, that it's something we give high potential people. So we have to work that side of it as well. Now, if they continue to be skeptical or they say, sure, I'm going to do this. If I'm getting that, say I'm in a couple sessions, I'll call that out and I'll say, look, this is my sense is that this is not for you because of these behaviors, but you tell me, like, is it me, I'm not the right person? Is it that we're working down the wrong paths? Because the goals are set by the client, what's not working for you here? And if they say this is not for me, then you don't coach somebody who isn't coachable, so to speak.
Yes.
They don't want to be coached.
How about, you know, we work across, geographies, we work across departments and even generations now. Do you find that there's a different strategy for geographical differences or even generational differences in regards to how you approach the coaching with that individual?
I'd say every individual, I'm sussing out how they learn best, if you
Right.
call coaching learning, right? And so some people are like, give me the thing to read. Some people are, let me think out loud. Other people are, I need an idea, ruminate, go deep. And then I'm going to think about that till the next time we meet, right? So there's always adaptation. When we talk about culture, we're talking about potentially an entire lens through which they see coaching, which is important. It may mean whatever demographic, American, woman, white, middle-aged, whatever, whatever demographic doesn't work for that cross-cultural lens. And that's important to know. It's very much incumbent upon the coach to know that, if you're not the right fit for somebody for any reason, if language is a barrier to them, and you could find somebody who could coach them in their own language, if that's helpful. But the Tata Consultancy, they have massive coaching integration throughout, their global operation. And so the way that they handle the coaching is very similar across from India to Europe to the US. They do allow some local autonomy in how it's designed and then introduced. So I think that is also a piece of, how do you introduce the coaching and how do you frame it up? And some cultures where somebody like a coach might be seen as a directive kind of teacher as opposed to a partner in thinking. We have to be sensitive to things.
Absolutely, absolutely. Your book, I'm going to read the title completely. Building the Core Competencies of Change, a Guide to Coaching in Organization. It's an excellent resource. Congratulations on publishing it. Can you elaborate on how specifically this can aid HR professionals in HR departments in developing coaching programs for their company?
Yeah, so I hope what I've done in the book is to first be able to dig deep enough into what coaching is and some different frameworks to think about it through. So how do we handle mindsets and mental models in coaching, emotions and values? And that really distinguishes coaching from a lot of the other interventions, like, mentorship can go there for sure. It's just, we're all about it, right? So what is coaching? What can it do? Lots of case histories of individuals who are coached. Then in the back half of the book, I talk about, well, then what are the tools of coaching that we have if we are going to lead coaching programs in an operation and organization? And so we talk about the types of coaching, the tools of coaching, and then we talk about the process or the approach. So that is, how could you be strategic in the way that you design and deliver coaching in your organization?
Very
And
good.
lots of case histories, I think that's so powerful when you can hear the stories of different organizations that have put coaching into their organizations. Yeah.
Within your years of experience working with especially organizations and businesses in different sizes, how do you see coaching provide competitive edge for them? Because bottom line, they want increase in productivity, increase in performance level, and increasing the bottom line profitability. I mean, if we cannot do that for them, then we have nothing to offer. How do you see coaching, in your experience and examples, if you may use, give organization competitive edges, and in
Yeah.
what area of the competition?
Yeah, so we talked just how by mistake that software company got a talent competitive advantage by being best place to work by integrating coaching. Well, let's say there are a number of case histories in this book about the fear of obsolescence, which with fast-paced technology change is very real. One story was about a telecommunications company who, never mind competitive advantage, we're talking competitive at all. Because of technology change, they were going to be obsolete. They were just going to lose market share. And so they knew that they faced this existential threat. And they looked at the people who were inside, very lovely managers, leaders, executive team, and they were very good at running and maintaining an operation as it stood today. But they didn't have the kind of innovative mindset, risk-taking. I mean, these are hard skills to just learn. Risk-taking? How do you do that, right? Creativity, outside the box thinking. So aligning coaching with some of the structural and systemic change that they did was very powerful in turning this existential threat around. They rejiggered their executive team to include some more innovative, creative technology types, right? So that the leadership had the capabilities to see forward. And then they gave them all coaches. And as I said before, you're sort of helping them into the growth mindset space. So those who are not practiced in thinking outside the box, or even knowing self-awareness around their styles and what gets in the way for them in being creative or risk-taking. Once we understand that, we can work with it. So they had coaching. And then they taught their HR people how to coach. So they were certified coaches in HR.
Also, you take the HR people through the certification so they can be internal coaches.
And also then they became quite practiced in understanding what coaching was, so that they then
That's a big
taught other people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Undertaking. Yeah, that's big.
Yeah. So we now have an experienced HR. We have executive team who really appreciates coaching, and then the creative impetus that has. They're also talking about empowering and building up competency within their people, and that means they have to be good at feedback loops, constructive feedback, change from the base up. You know, we got to hire a whole new team of technology experts in a brand new field and integrate those into our organization. I mean, you were talking about, the older generation and the younger generation. I mean, that's what they dealt with in large part. So they had to coach both sides of that.
Yeah.
How to keep our really good leaders who don't know what this technology thing is, but that they're going to really help those people and support them. So they created a coaching culture. It was actually over the course of 3 years that they worked on this. But I would say after year 2, they were really well on their way of adopting, marketing, and successfully navigating this new marketplace.
I tell you a funny story. This gentleman have a beautiful car collection. Took me for a ride on the 57 Chevy. I fell in love with that car. It was like brand new. That's his passion, right? Then I asked him, hey, such and such, where do you go with this car with your wife? So we go around having a good time, having ice cream, coming home. He said, how's the car performing? Oh, perfect. Would you take this car to Pittsburgh? Oh, no, I cannot take him for that long. Why? Why not? He's not going to stand. He's not going to perform. I said, exactly. You asking me to take your company from 1960s to 2030s. I need you to work with the technology that support this performance. And he really got it, but still.
So that's so imagine the trust that you built with him,
Yes.
And the ability to use metaphor that hits home in a different way than I can tell you. But yeah.
He totally got it.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
One of the things that HR professionals, and we've talked around it a bit, but one of the things that they struggle with a great deal is like, how do you align a sponsor's objective with the actual client, right? So I get, and I'll talk on an individual, but it's the same with teams and everything else, right? We know that coaching is a confidential black box
Oh,
to
yeah.
work most effectively with some of the change we're talking about because it's vulnerable. But we also want to make it make sense in the business paradigm, as you were talking about before. So if my sponsor comes to me, for example, and they say, hey, I want you to coach Joe, and man, he's like beaten up on his team, so he needs to stop that. And my first question is, well, does Joe know that you think that? Has Joe been messaged? It isn't the coach's
I had
job.
almost the same exact scenario recently.
Yeah. So we're consulting in essence around the engagement itself. And we're making sure that the message is clear. And another way we might do that is say, you know what, I hear the power behind that and the need for Joe to change. So what I'd like to do is have an alignment meeting with you, me, and the client, where the client and I have already going to set up a rapport, and we already have some ideas of what the client wants to talk about. But now we're going to talk, and he's going to tell you what he's going to work on. He doesn't have to tell you anything he doesn't want to tell you, but he's going to tell you what he's working on. You get to comment on that. But then if there's something missing, or if there's something that you think should be different, that's your opportunity to align with the client. And in essence, the coach is supporting not just the client, but also the client leader relationship,
Oh,
because
yeah.
helping train them how to give constructive feedback, in essence, or give them opportunity to open that door. So aligning sponsor and client, you could do the same thing with the team. We do interviews around the clients, whether it's a team or an individual, to find out what the system expectations is of that. And those are the ways in which we make sure that we're not completely coaching outside the benefits that could happen for the organization.
That is one of my difficulties, to get a sponsor to understand we cannot enforce what you want. I pay for the bills, I pay for the invoice, I want them to do ABC. It doesn't work that way. It is very difficult for them to get that confidentiality.
Yeah.
Oh, tell me what happened. I cannot tell you what happened. Like, they can't get this concept, and that make it very difficult. And I had to walk the sponsor through the space of trusting me, or trusting the outcome, and
Yep.
letting the outcome arise by itself. And I always tell them, hey, here what we have done before. This is like guarantee you will have a result, but you need to trust, which I can't blame them for mistrust or not completely trust the outcome when they're paying a big bill, and they don't see
That's right.
immediate outcome. They want now. When
Yeah.
it comes 2 or 3 years, woo, it's too long. I want it now.
It's really important. And so we're actually assisting the sponsor as well as the client, assisting the integrity of the coaching, which leads me to the question of ethics, in particular for HR people, which is, if I'm an HR person and I'm going to weigh in on somebody's promotion, firing, I don't
Oh,
know,
yeah.
resource
Awesome.
allocation, right? And let's say, and so I sit on an ethics committee, I review these cases. In one case, we had someone who was wearing those two hats. And in the contracting phase with the client, meaning this is how we're going to work together and confidentiality and all that, they weren't completely transparent of the other future roles they might play. And maybe you don't even know what all of them are. You might get promoted and then have new responsibilities, right? But to the best of your ability to contract with that client to say, this is a possibility, then the client can determine how much they share or what types of things they share. So HR professionals internal to the organization, they have this kind of area that they need to play in. That's a little challenging for them. Yeah.
That is one of the pitfalls that you might face as a coach. Is
Mhm.
there any other pitfalls you can underline about between the HR department and legality of their position, which is, all the complaints come to HR, between that and between producing the result, maybe even pushing a little bit usual, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so easy that somebody says, "Oh, don't talk to me this way. Don't talk to me with that tone," or "You're not the boss of me." You don't tell me what to do. Have you had any experience on these pitfalls, and how you resolve them in case if you had any?
Yeah. So, as if I'm sitting in the chair of the HR professional, the one area that I can usually solve a lot of ills is in that upfront contracting process and being clear about what we do and what we don't do, and any limits to confidentiality, such as I must report wrongdoing,
Yes.
those kinds of things. If I suspect that there is a mental health care issue, I will refer you on to our programs here. Those kinds of things, as long as you're transparent, they're good. But bias, bias is something that plays even without our conscious brain in the action. So if I'm an HR person coaching somebody and they're saying, we're going to shut down the HR department, I'm pretty vested.
Right.
So I would like to be transparent once again. And I would say to my client, wow, this sounds like a big decision for you, one that I'm actually quite vested in. So what I would like to do is perhaps recuse myself from this part of our coaching and have you work with an external coach or somebody else, right? We're always just we have to admit that we all have bias.
Oh yeah, but listen, I hate coach family members in one company. A small family business, right? When I
Oh,
say small, it can go to $10 million annually. But
mm,
I try to avoid that like a plague.
yeah.
And husband and wife, father and son, mother and oh my God, cannot get them to really get the impact, negative impact of their family attachment.
It's a very strong, it's a specialty area in coaching, and having had a family business experience, what some of the pitfalls are. I would recommend that you coach other people's families.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
You mentioned about contracting and being transparent with your clients. How do you ensure that you're not overpromising? A lot of times people have these huge expectations of this transformation from coaching. How do make sure that you're actually in alignment with what their expectations are with what you're able to deliver?
Um, because we have contracting, which is how we're going to work together right up front. But within every coaching session, we are goal setting. So I might say to my executive client, you've got these three big areas you want to work. Great. We've got an agenda, so to speak, around the coaching. But every session that we meet, I'll say, so what did you take away from last time? Any new learning? What's going to be most powerful for you today? So now it's their job, because we're in a partnership. It's their job to bring the thing that matters to them. And now if I'm on some level, they're like, I still feel stuck after working with you, Sandy, 3 months, and I'm still stuck on the same darn problem. So, it's okay. Let's partner on that. I'm glad you told me. What other resources might be better for you? We can continue in the coaching for other issues, but maybe it's not me. What would serve you best? So I was talking to not meeting their expectations in the coaching, right? But if they have something they want from the coaching and I'm not delivering, we need to have that conversation of what they need, right? But if there's some sponsor who's saying this person's still really awful with their team after coaching with you, Sandy, um, I said, well, okay, we did the alignment meeting where you messaged that to them directly. We had our second alignment meeting where you said, I'm not seeing enough progress here. And now it's leadership's job to determine what they do with that. I can't make my client be somebody that they aren't willing to step into. Yeah.
How about a lot of times you get you're hired by the sponsor to work with a particular executive or a group or individual. How do you avoid being the scapegoat? That because that happens quite a bit in consulting. I would imagine that happens also in coaching.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've got some pretty tough cultures out there where their whole paradigm around coaching could be, we're going to bring her in, and if she fails, it's her fault, right? I mean, that's how they deal with their people too. Be careful as a coach who you work with. Number
Mm.
one, you can only say so many times in so many ways that it's the client's responsibility for the outcomes. And it's not fun to work in that culture. It's not fun to be considered the magic bullet. I don't want to be the magic bullet. I'm not. The power of my client's ability to come forward with solutions is awesome. I just need to help them in the thinking process to do it.
It make a difference when they pull in their weight.
Oh,
That is something that we always set up on the beginning, that we are not walking on the water. You have to help as a senior manager, as a team. You have to support us to win with you, because we cannot do it alone.
That key piece that you're talking about, that whole idea of the silver bullet, right? That a lot of times people believe that you're going to come in and you'll be able to fix and correct everything that needs to be fixed. And if it's not, then at least we can say we did what we can and she just didn't carry her end of it.
Even that as a premise is a tough one, right? I had a sponsor come to me and say, look, she's always been this way. It's really annoying people. So, I mean, this is our last ditch attempt before we fire her. I said, you know what? That's not me. I think that's her leader. I think that's a performance plan.
Right.
Now, here's what I would be able to do is I can give you that last bit of alignment meeting focused coaching, right? Where I'm talking to the leader and the client together throughout the coaching, keeping the coaching confidential, and knowing, making sure that the leader is messaging the severity of the situation with the client. And you know what? The client already was there. I mean, they were already talking about, Sandy, I've been thinking I might move on, because they weren't getting happy messages.
Right.
And we're there to support that. If she wanted to talk about how to find the next position, probably it would serve, well, it did. It served both entities, the client and the sponsor.
Very good. Sandy, the return of investment is big for any organizations, right? Return on investment, and especially HR, which is usually the host, bringing somebody like you to the organization. How do you measure? What is the metrics you use usually to present the success of the progress or undertaking, and how is it effective or not effective? So they can measure against their expectation, maybe, or what is in the contract.
Yeah. So if they want to do interviews of their own HR department about my client.
With their coaches, right?
Sorry. So my coach needs to be better at X. My client. So now HR wants to measure exactly what this coaching is going to do. If they want to interview around those aspects of the client ahead, it's not me, it's them, and see the data from those interviews in the front. And then they're asking the questions they want to know about, the very things the return on investment they want to seek, right? So getting them clear, what exactly you think you can measure here, if that's what you want. You're welcome to do those interviews around my client. And then at the end of the coaching. So if I'm to do interviews with my client owns the results of those interviews, and they may be very highly encouraged to share those with the sponsor, but I'm not going to make it about measuring their performance in the coaching, because then they don't trust me.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And you may say also too, I asked, for larger scale coaching engagements, we're going to coach an entire level of management. My first question is why? Well, we knew it's a good thing. Okay, well, what are the biggest challenges you have at that level? Is there a way in which you're getting succession set up? Is there a way in which you're wanting to build specific skills around who they lead or whatever? So if you know why up front, that's your return on expectation data, right? Here's the clear expectations. So then we'll go measure on the back end. So we might see people measuring engagement of that level of management of the people below them. Are they more engaged? Because that's what we set up as an expectation up front. We might do 360s on certain types of decision-making behavior, do it on the back end. So the more you articulate the why up front and how you might measure that, that's going to be most helpful for proving results from the coaching.
Absolutely. In our upcoming book, Building an Organizational Coaching Culture, that we had a privilege of having you writing 2 chapters on that book, you mentioned that coaching culture foster internal competencies. Could you expand on what you mean by that, please?
Yeah. So if we are coaching a leader or implementing coaching throughout an organization, so now it is a coaching culture, what is it we are engendering in terms of the competency and building the core competencies of change? I talked about it before. So here we're looking at partnership and empowerment, and we're looking at as a competency. Goal setting, transformative goal setting. So really getting to root cause of a goal in what we're trying to change. So it's the human challenge side of the goal, right? Building safe learning environments is another competency of a coaching culture. And finally, creative and original thinking. So when I think the safety one is a really interesting one. And so how do you measure, how do you make that line from coaching culture to safe environment? Well, we haven't done a whole bunch of research on coaching itself, but we have observed some of the coaching skills and measured what happens to trust when you say deploy servant leadership. And what is servant leadership? It's empowerment and caretaking of the well-being of others, of your direct reports, for example. What happens to trust when you have servant leaders versus more directive leaders? Trust is higher. So now we can see the relationship between the coaching competencies and efficacy inside of these competencies in the organization.
Very great. The last question, it just dawned on me. Fun question. Have you ever had a staff resign after got the coaching from you? I had that experience myself. Like they realized they don't want to work with this organization. They had an aha moment. They had an epiphany. Oh my God, I gotta go. Have you had that? And how do you handle it?
Yeah, I mean, Behnam, they, as you well know, you are helping them to become the deciders of their lives. You're giving them
Exactly.
choices. And whereas they just didn't know that they had choices before, they suddenly realize they do. And they know their value better. They're more confident. I mean, this is just all these outcomes from coaching. What I find is, and I say it happened this morning in a coaching session, is that that people want to talk about the possibility this isn't the right fit for them. And 90% of the time they stay in the organization. And I would argue that attrition is lower for those individuals who are coached. Why? Because we coach their stress. We coach their fit for the job, give them choices in how to execute on a job that they don't do as well as they could. And so there's so many ways that we help keep people in organizations. But if they leave, it was probably the right decision for everybody,
Yeah, I actually mentioned that in the contracting phase, that it is happening. It might happen here also. So I don't take any responsibility for people having awakening. And
Yeah.
then if somebody left, I always told the manager or supervisor, you want to look at your relationship with them. You want to look at what happened. You want to
Yep.
look at, you miss the whispers and now you're dealing with the storm. When the whispers come, you push it back. Now you have to deal with the storm.
And I'm sure you've seen this a lot, but you're coaching somebody and you're seeing them buffeted by a culture or a leadership team that is just not getting it in terms of how to keep talented, high potential people.
Right.
And we wish we could coach them,
To their benefit. And that is the complex between the sponsor's agenda and what actually happening on the coaching.
Yeah, for sure.
So I have a quick question about looking a little bit more in the future. So right now there's all these different platforms that are popping up in regards to utilizing virtual coaching. What are your thoughts about that, and how is that changing the profession as a field, and how is that impacting the kind of skills that are needed now to be an effective coach?
Yeah, so you may be talking about coach aggregators, like BetterUp and Optify. So they will more cost effectively bring coaches into your organizations. They usually contract with the organization on hundreds of people, like maybe lower management levels than I can afford to bring in an external coach or use an internal coach for. The good thing about some of those organizations is that they're strategic. They say, who do you want to coach in your organization for what purpose? That would be a good relationship.
Right.
Very often, because of the cost consideration here, they get 6 sessions, and they scope it fairly small around maybe some leadership advancement that they want to see. Now, all good. So the sponsor is paying less for the coaching. They are coaching more people, but it's not the kind of deeper coaching over, say, 6 months that you might be able to afford for a leader that can make really fundamental change in, the kind of competencies that we were talking about.
Right.
So it has its place. What I worry about into the future is that people think that because more people have had that type of coaching, because it's so mass produced, that's what coaching is.
Right.
And coaching is much more than that. It is that, and it's other, right?
Yeah.
People think you might get an AI coach. Okay, I have a robot asking me questions. Um, they're great little reminders. They're like, oh, I hadn't thought of that question. That's a good question. But nothing replaces the energy between coach and client of
Amen.
human presence and the kinds of things that happen with people when they have that kind of touch point with somebody and they're sharing things that are their values and their mindsets and the most important things to them. That's different.
Absolutely, Sandra. Amen to that. Nothing
Would you
replaces
have that?
trust, empathy, and compassion.
For somebody who's new into the field of coaching, or an organization that is implementing having more coaches, or somebody who's maybe in the field for a while, what recommendation do you have for somebody to stay abreast, to stay current, to stay connected, even if they have to use a virtual platforms? What recommendations do you have for them?
Oh, I think it's one of the needs of all coaches is to stay like you're always learning. I've been doing this 20 years, over 20 years, and I am still learning how to be a better coach. So there are so many resources out there. There are many coaching associations that you could become a member of. HR associations are now really deeper and deeper into the coaching piece and training on that. There's ways to volunteer as a coach. I know the ICF so I'll speak to the International Coaching Federation. They have reciprocal coaching, they have continuing education credits, they have pro bono coaching aligned with the UN sustainability goals on most recently on education and creating pro bono coaching across the globe for teachers and schools. So there's so many ways that at the same time you're enhancing skills and knowledge of coaching, you can build community, make a difference in the world, and learn. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Absolutely. We are end of our time. Sandra Stewart, thank you for your knowledge, your experience, and the contribution you did to this podcast. We certainly appreciate
Oh, thank you so much for being here. What a joy. Thanks, Ben.
it. Absolutely. And any last word from you, Aileen?
I really value the things that you said, your knowledge, your expertise. I love the way that you align it a lot of times back to the organization, because a lot of times we tend to look at coaching from just the perspective of the personal, and we don't really are able to align to get into the ROI and what the true value of what coaching can really be. So I really appreciate you bringing that to the forefront of the way you approach coaching. So thank you so very much.
You're
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now